Welcome to the Conceive, Believe, and Achieve show. I'm your host, Sean Garris. Today's guest is Vern Gambetta. He is a functional sports trainer. He has worked in sports such as track and field, baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey, tennis, softball, swimming, and American football. Of course, mentioning all those sports, he has operated at the professional level, working with teams such as the Chicago White Sox, the New York Mets, the Chicago Bulls, and of course, the San Francisco 49ers, the Kansas City Chiefs, the University of Michigan swim team, and let's not forget Canada's own Summer McIntosh. Sit back, pull up a seat, and get ready for this one. It's a good one. Hey, Vern, just want to welcome you to the show. But before we get started, I want to let you know how I found out about you. It was actually through Jim Richardson of the University of Michigan swim team. He had some really great things to say about you, tell you the truth. When I was chatting with him, he said that he was looking to improve his dryland training, and he reached out to you. And as a result of that, you guys built a
friendship, and I consider him. He's a go-to person when I need advice, and he's always uh, in terms of training advice and just interpersonal relationships and that. I really count Jim as a mentor too. It was a wonderful experience. I mean, he was at the point where he knew something different needed to be done, and it was courageous on his part because it was outside what was accepted at Michigan at the time, the type of training they were doing, and yeah, and so it was a mutual uh, exploratory journey that we both fed off of each other, and it 20 years later, there's a lot of athletes reaping the benefits of the things that we put out there on that was, I guess in a sense cutting edge. I brought a lot of things from other sports that I've worked with that people were reluctant to include in swimming, too. So yeah.
friendship.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I did a little research on you, and I talked to Jim about you. I mean, he had just glowing things to say, but he actually gave me a peek into one of and you are a strength and conditioning coach. Is that the title you prefer, or is there some other
No,
title?
I actually, to be honest, I'm going to be very, I'm very straightforward. I abhor that title. I
Okay.
think one of the worst things that's happened in the whole field of preparing athletes. I'd prefer to be called an athletic development coach or an athletic performance coach. You can't separate strength and conditioning. There's so many factors that go into preparing an athlete to be better that it's not just strength, it's not just conditioning. So I think it's words create images and images create action. And so if you think about that, think about, I don't know if you were a high school athlete or whatever. You mentioned your brother was a wrestler at my alma mater. You go Bulldogs.
Yeah.
Conditioning, well, at least my age, you thought about, running hundreds and puking, and then strength, you were in the weight room trying to max out all the time. And it's a little more sophisticated than that.
Yeah, and that's what really kind of, when I started looking at your bio and I started looking at Gains. Gains is the organization that you've
Yeah.
established, that works with all sorts of athletes. And sorry, before we get into it, because I want to tell the audience who you've worked with, and of course you can add. I mean, you've been in a lot of sports, from track and field, baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey, tennis, softball, swimming, and American football. And those are not just that. I mean,
Cricket.
certainly,
Don't
uh,
forget cricket. I'll talk a little bit about cricket and
cricket. Okay,
rugby, and both
yeah,
both th- all three all two codes of rugby and rugby sevens. Yeah, so yeah, I've been able to touch them all except for lacrosse,
uh,
which is a shame because it's a cool game. But anyway, yeah.
yeah. Now, have you gotten into wrestling at all?
Actually, yeah, no, I have not. No, I have not. I feel like honestly, I've learned a lot from wrestling.
Yep.
At Fresno State, we had to take a combatives class, both boxing and wrestling.
Hmm.
And there was a couple of guys I played football with that were wrestlers, and one of my gain a couple of my game people are quite good wrestling coaches, and so a lot of the movements are things that we've incorporated in our what loosely is called sort of ground based agility, and the wrestling piece is just super super important. In rugby league and rugby union, but as far as working directly with wrestling, no, I have not. It's a great sport, great sport.
Yeah. Well, I was thrown to the wolves with wrestling. My dad was a three-time Olympian for Canada.
Oh wow,
Yeah, 68, 72, and 76.
wow,
He
okay,
went
that's
to,
impressive. Yeah,
if you probably going to this, probably you're probably his age.
yep.
But he went to Oklahoma State, and if you
Oh
remember,
my God, if you went to Oklahoma State, that tells you right away. I mean, that's an iconic wrestling school. I mean, I followed the sport, Oklahoma State, Penn State, Arizona State, Iowa State, and then Iowa yeah. Oh man, that's impressive right there, especially at that time. Yeah.
yeah, and he ended up making All American status with them, so that was even a better great notch on his belt. I became a wrestler as a result of that, just by default. I did play football, and I did wrestle at Eastern Michigan University, but
Oh,
also prior to that in Fresno at Fresno City College with
okay.
Coach Music,
Yeah.
Bill Music. I don't know if you know that name.
I know Bill Music. I know the name. I don't know him. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
years and
they
years
had a
ago.
really good program, really good junior college program, as
Yeah.
Fresno State did at the time too, probably. And then
Yeah.
they dropped it, and then they revived it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So my brother was there before they dropped it with Dennis DeLito. But going into that, the reason why I said that is as I got into athletics, and you touched on it a little bit, but it used to be the separation, the conditioning, and the strength. And
right.
of course, I would be the guy in the weight room. I'm a big guy. I go and push the weights, and then I would try to run because you'd have to do some conditioning for wrestling.
Somebody told you had to. Yeah, yeah,
Um, but it's always been that way. And even when I progressed into coaching, I kind of thought I had this background where, I worked under a personal trainer. He showed me a little bit of maybe about, maybe it kind of touched on some of the stuff that you may have been doing in your earlier years. But when I started reading your background and talking about kinetic chain,
yeah, yeah.
I think we missed the boat on my training when it came to that.
Exactly. It probably was the strength work. If I can I don't want to put words in your mouth, but was probably more bodybuilding oriented. So I'm training upper body, I'm training chest, I'm training backs, I'm training legs, rather than. And it's a clear contrast to what we do. Is I'm interested in helping you to perform on the mat. I'm interested to help you perform on the pool. So what I want to do is how I connect. How do I connect body parts? Get them to coordinate. Get them to sync better, so your technique is better, and make you better at your sport. And by the way, you'll get really fit and you'll look pretty good too. But it's a different. It's looking at it through a different lens. It's toenails to fingernails rather than you know oh, I got to get my, like in judo, people say I got to get my grip really strong. Well, I can have the strongest grip in the world, but if I'm not strong through the center, I'm going to be on the mat. I'm going to be losing matches all the time. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that you're talking about. I think in one of your might have been in one of your books. You were talking about how when you're training for, I guess it was a runner, doing, I guess, leg extensions and leg, like,
curls. Yeah.
it doesn't really equate to the transfer
Mm-mm.
over to the sport.
Mm-mm. It's makes you tired. Might give you bigger biceps femoris, bigger quads, but you have to look about in running, and you have to look in sprinting, jumping. What happens when the foot hits the ground? What happens literally from the foot, the ankle, the knee, the hip, and how those things connect. And so to work in those in isolation are great for bodybuilding, but you don't have the coordination of the muscles working at the appropriate time, eccentrically, concentrically, isometrically, and in sprinting, it happens all, we'll be generous and say a tenth of a second when your foot is on the ground. So doing a lot of, slow body type of bodybuilding movements, isolating muscles, it's, it just doesn't transfer, and that's probably one of the biggest. If I have a frustration, well, I have a frustration of myself early on as an athlete, because we in 64 through 68, Fresno State, we didn't have, maybe we were fortunate we didn't. So I was learning all this stuff. We didn't have guidance. I was learning all this stuff on my own. So I'd go off, and 3 months I'd do this, and 3 months I'd do that. And I learned really quickly in that 3 months when I was on machines and when I was doing bodybuilding stuff. People were saying, "Oh man, you're really getting big." I couldn't move, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't move anybody else. So how do you play football? I mean, and so that made me really start the gestation of all of this started. What, 50? That's almost 60 years ago, really, 1965. I found some stuff. We're getting ready to move, and I found some stuff that I filed away from then. And yeah, so it's a constant learning process. I'm learning right now, and I'm working with two really, really great female athletes, one in swimming and one in cricket, one of the best cricket players in the world and one of the best cricket players ever. So every time you look at a different sport, you look at a different athlete, male to female. It's like, okay, how do I take the principles from over here, and how do I put them into practice in the arena, so to speak, right? So, yeah, that's. I told you I can talk. So,
Oh, just keep talking. We're not gonna we're not worried about that.
okay.
I think what you're hitting on is something I watched a video of some of your training. I went to the swim website, this Gain Swim website, and I was
Yeah.
watching some of the athletes there, and I was watching them do squats, but they weren't doing just squats. They were doing squats with their hands up.
Overhead. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
over that. And is that what you're talking about? You're transferring, I guess this is the training, the conditioning to a
Yeah, that's
different.
yeah, that's a big part of it, and there's other sports we do that, but again, everything's got to transfer through the center, and in all sports, it's about making shapes and changing shapes. But a key shape in swimming is really being able to streamline and elongate. So we do some stuff with a stick overhead. Some of the teams with older kids do stuff with a bar, and it really forces you to connect your lower body to your upper body. So yeah, that's a uh, you know pretty strong emphasis, no pun intended. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched that. Before I started doing research on your stuff, I started watching the videos. I was scratching my head because I came from the old school of training.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
Right.
why aren't they doing squats? Why aren't they doing leg press? Why aren't they doing this?
Right.
They're doing these unweighted, kind of ridiculous looking squats. But there is obviously a theory. The kinetic chain needs to be worked.
Method to the madness. Yeah, and one of my axioms, Sean, is that um, I implement. Believe it or not, I implemented this in pro baseball, and I've implemented it in soccer, pro soccer, and then is weight room without walls. See, we create these barriers by, okay, we have to, strength training can only happen in the weight room, and so uh, um, symbolically and actually by taking the walls down and being closer to the venue. So I don't know what videos you've seen, but here in Sarasota now, like right now, it's got ungodly hot, even at 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
We have an outdoor area that's part of it is covered, and that's where we do all our everything out of the water is done there. And I have a strong opinion. What I've seen too is it helps with overall fitness. I mean, we're there in January. Believe it or not, it gets in the 30 degrees Fahrenheit, 35, and now it's 110 heat index. And I don't believe in mental toughness, but it forces you to really hone in on what you have to do. And then when we were in pro baseball, I primarily worked with the minor leaguers, and they traveled with some weights on the bus. They'd work out in the parking lot. So it's with pro athletes, it's never given an excuse not to train. Too, was part of the philosophy. So you can get strong and fit anywhere. As evidence. I mean, again, look at history. Look back. What great athletes have done before we had these palatial frigid, air conditioned weight rooms, which doesn't prepare you for the environment that you're going to have to, to perform in. So, yeah.
I can remember training as a wrestler and going down to Cuba, and we would have the air conditioned wrestling rooms. Even when I wrestled at Eastern Michigan, same thing, an air conditioned wrestling room. But of course, Coach Gadsden would turn it down.
Yeah.
But in Cuba,
Yeah.
it was a different atmosphere, and I
Oh,
think. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. No.
I was thinking that it actually, it got us better for competition. Like it was, like you said, you were going into a better environment, preparing yourself for that that competition because it was so much closer to what you needed.
Well, Cuba's a great example right now. I mean, they're 90 miles from the U.S., but they're in many respects they're a third world country, except in medical care and in sports and things like that. And if you look at their facilities in sports, they're primitive now. They're from the 50s and 60s, and they still are turning out great athletes. They're still turning out great athletes, and so there's a lot. I got to interact. I did a lot of consulting work for about 4 years down in Trinidad with their Ministry of Sport, and one of their athletics coaches was a really good throws coach who coached the uh, Olympic champion in London in 2012, and got to know him really well. And we talked a lot about it. And he didn't need much. He didn't need much. Some weighted balls, some dumbbells, some medicine balls. We didn't. And we needed a good Olympic set in the weight room, but that was it. And yeah, so it can be done. But I think there tends to be this. Uh, uh, that it's primitive, it's backward if you're not using a lot of things that are shining and go bling and spit numbers out at you and things like that. I mean, some of that is really good and can really help, but I want to keep it really basic. Yeah.
Hmm. Because that's what works. Even in the weight room, I know that if we're not, going to the basics, if you want to create like some sort of hypertrophy, I always stick to the deadlifts, the things that actually work. Going to the machines kind of cheat, and you don't just get the same results. I'm assuming it's the same way. If you want real results, you got to perform the results so much closer to what sport
Yeah, closer
you're.
to what you're doing. Exactly. Yeah.
I remember one of your quotes. I think you said it in one of the Singapore, uh, I guess, lectures that you were talking about. But it was what stays in Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And you said what happens in the gym stays in the gym. Can you
And what
explain?
happens in the weight room stays in the weight room, just
Yeah.
like Las Vegas. Well, is that what we want? So I said to somebody the other day in a phone conversation, I said, "Well, how many hours a week do you strength train?" And then I said, in the weight room. And he said, this person said 5, and I said, "Okay, what would I say to you that if you cut that down to 90 minutes of what you need to do in the weight room, and then another 90 minutes uh, where we can do more movement outside, and that, and I sound like a snake oil salesman, I'm not, and I could virtually guarantee you better results, so, because and it's not like I'm against the weight room. I mean, if I were working with football linemen, we'd spend, particularly offensive linemen, a little more time there. You have to overcome resistance, shot putters. So it's all I don't think use the word so much what's specific is what's appropriate. What's appropriate? What's going to make you better? And Sean, the way I think of it, the last time I went up to the top of the mountain to get the tablets, that's a joke. And they fell and I broke them on the way down. So I'm trying to remember what was on them before they broke. And I go, here's the way. The traditional paradigm is I've got my physical preparation space, people, whatever. I have sport practice, okay, and that's where it can be even in individual skills, and then I have team practice as part of practice, and then I have the game, the match, the meet, okay. And I used to think that, okay, what I do up here in the physical preparation space directly makes me better in the game. And I go, wait a minute. that isn't the way it works. What I do in the physical preparation space is make you functionally stronger, more robust, more resilient, adaptable, so you can go to practice now. And instead of, in your case, wrestling, working on takedown moves for 3 minutes and then fatiguing, you can work on them for 6 minutes at high quality and then go into the match prepared for the match. You see what I'm saying? So it's preparing for that, preparing for the actual training, the actual, and the same thing we do in swimming. Our swimmers, because they are we're working on these shapes and we're working on these. So they're, first of all, 98% injury free, no shoulder problems. Although one of our good Canadian girls right now has a weird thing going on with nerve, but I'm not sure what's going on, but it bothers me. But anyway, because we just don't generally have those. But but they can get in the pool now, and when they're working on a particular stroke, like butterfly that requires a lot of strength and stability, they can do maybe instead of 3 times or 6 times 50 long course, maybe they can do 2 sets of 6 now or something like that. So that's how you get better, and it's so it's an investment in a process to make yourself physically more robust to be able to practice better. How's that? That's probably the best, simplest way I've ever said it. So
I like that. Even touching on the tablets.
yeah, right. Yeah.
So you had mentioned injuries, and I was watching your morning walks. That let's dissect that before.
Great
I'm not
cramps.
spying
Yeah.
on you. You're on
No, it's okay.
Instagram.
I wouldn't put them on if I didn't care if people listen to them. So go
So
ahead.
you were
Go
talking
ahead.
about
Sorry.
injuries and how I guess they're preventable through training.
That's my experience. I don't even say opinion. I won't say what pro baseball team I was consulting with, and I thought a doctor was going to stab me with a scalpel because I said hamstring injuries, groin injuries, calf pulls, certain shoulder injuries, intercostal muscle injuries are preventable. But what happens in a lot of sports, they just expect them, expect, and they accept them. I refuse to accept them. I'm very proud of the fact that the teams and the athletes that I've worked with extensively have had minimal injuries. We went. I was with the White Sox director of conditioning in the minor leagues for 9 years. We had 5 hamstring pulls. If you go online today, there's 5 hamstring pulls a week in most Major League Baseball teams. Why? There's a certain method. I just went and visited my former boss, who's in ill health, and we were talking about that. And you can't make the club in the tub, they used to say. If you're sitting in the whirlpool because you're sore or you're hurt, you can't make the club.
Mhm.
And so that's the thing. And at times it's been career saving for some of the athletes. And it's just common sense. It's the shoulders connected to the hips connected to the knee, to the ankle, to the foot. So let's look at what you're doing. Let's look at your technique. Let's look at the demands that are placed upon you and prepare you for those demands. But instead, what we've done today, sorry, I'm gonna get on a rant here. We've gotten so concerned about load management. Oh my God, Vern's going to get tired. Let's not do too much. Well, and now because we're not doing too much, we're having injuries because people aren't doing enough. You see what I'm saying? To prevent what you're doing. There was a terrific graphic on Facebook last week of Bob Gibson. It's 60. I can't remember what year. Whatever year this was, in the middle of the 60s, he threw I want to say 20 9-inning games. He threw over 300 innings. And in the playoffs, I think he threw 3 9-inning games. Why? First of all, he was an athlete and he trained like an athlete. He was a great basketball player. He never lost those qualities. and he threw on the days when they didn't pitch, they threw live, what they call live BP, to the hitters. And it was a different era. I get that. Um, but we've gone so far the other way in virtually all sports that it's alarming to me, because if you look at injuries are not reducing. They're actually, in a lot of sports, they're on an upward curve with certain injuries. And I think it's because we're not creating robust athletes by putting a stress on them at the proper time to prepare them for competition.
What do you think? Is that part of the mental makeup of an athlete as well?
Yes, it is, but I think the best sports psychologist you have is your coach, and I think that I think that you learn the athlete. I know my athletes. I have a lot of them here in Sarasota. I've got, when I go down tomorrow morning, it's not just summer. I have 39 other ones, and you try to get to know them, and you know who you have to push, who you have to hold back, and yeah, you notice I'm dancing around the mental toughness, that kind of stuff. I think I think that's where our one of our themes when I coached runners and now in swimming is own the finish. Nobody's going to beat us in the last 50. We are going to. You saw what happened in the last 50 in Toronto
Yeah,
to break the world
amazing.
record. She had nobody there. She could have just let up and and that. No, nobody will beat you, and that's the mentality we try to. So we try to. It's part of culture, and you make that upfront objectives, and you teach young people how to push the envelope without killing themselves, too. So, because I think and unfortunately, when I played football in college at Fresno State, it was brutality.
Hmm.
A lot of talk about, being tough and growling and spitting and blowing snot, and it was mindless. No, that's not what we're talking about. It's it's learning. I keep coming back. VHQ, very high quality. Elise Perry, who's the cricket player, one of the best in the world. One of her old themes. I've had her write it on her glove. Everything you do is very high quality. When the quality drops off, that's when you finish. That's when you move on to the next set in the workout. And that. So I know I sound a little bit. I do. I'm fanatic about that. I want high quality so it transfers to competition. I can make you tired, Sean. How quick do you want to get tired? That's what I say. You want to get minute tired? Do you want to get 30-minute tired? And you're a wrestler. You know what that's like.
Hmm.
I mean, you could turn up the heat in the wrestling room, and you were probably a 220 or something like that. You're up
98 a while back.
98. Okay, and wrestle a 165
Hmm.
and go 3-minute rounds, and those guys could probably turn you every way but
Hmm.
lose. Run you around the mat. Is that productive? To a certain
Hmm.
extent, maybe, but not to the extent at which we do it. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah,
Wow. Now, is that similar to, I guess it was Dan Gable that kind of, when he would go in the room, he would pick the toughest kid in that room and just work his butt off with that
yeah,
person. Is
yeah,
that the threshold you're looking for?
yeah. I mean, I don't. I've seen the documentaries on Dan Gable. I've read his book. I
Hmm.
I think there's iconic figures in various sports that good and bad things that they did were are handed down and copied,
Hmm.
and I think that some of the stuff that he did was over the top,
Hmm.
you know, in my and he's a physical mess. I mean, he's virtually a cripple. He's had every replaceable joint
Hmm.
replaced. Yeah, I think there's some of that, is how you pair people off, your people, and like the Mamba mentality. I'm not putting down a dead guy, but so you turn the lights on in the gym at 3 o'clock in the morning. Does that make you better than if you did it at 3 in the afternoon?
No.
You have to ask yourself that
Yeah.
now. Okay. And somebody says one of the NBA draft, I've got the Mamba mentality. Well, is your work mindful or mindless?
Hmm.
You know, I mean, I've worked with mindless athletes that will just work, but it doesn't. Sooner or later you break down. Break down either mentally or physically or both. too. So,
Yeah, I think, I was one of those mindless athletes coming back from, and not knowing because I was naive. My
oh, yeah, yeah,
my dad was
yeah.
my coach. I had a personal trainer that just was right into, lifting weights. So I would just go into the gym and grind and grind and grind and grind. Wasn't the best productive thing to do. Again, injuries and tired, too tired, at times to go into the competitions. Much.
Well, in your defense and my defense, some of it we didn't know any better. Look, I played football in college. I didn't compete in track. I love track, but because I had such a massive scholarship, $50 a semester, I couldn't give that up. So I competed in track after college,
Yeah.
and I have to make up. My attitude was I have to make up for lost time. Nobody's going to work harder than me. Well, that's great, but it got me to a point, and then I just physically almost, was breaking down. And I came up with a routine that we use now. I was teaching junior high school. I'd get up, have a nice breakfast, go to school, go to the multi-purpose room. I'd climb the rope. I would do pegboard. I'm sure you did pegboard as a wrestler.
Mhm.
I do a set of max pull-ups. I teach my first period class, and I change into my running gear. I'd run a 600 meters, 6 times 100-meter hills, go shower, have a shake, teach a gym class. Between every gym class, I did something I did for discus, something for shot. So I basically I did 5 15-minute sessions before I did, and then I would go do my main session after coaching at 2 schools, and that would be an hour long. Now I got really fit, but I was tired all the time.
Mhm.
And so, and finally I came to the realization and go, and a listener will say, why are we listening to this guy? I came to the realization that, yeah, doing that one day and then taking it easy the next day and doing that one day and taking it easy the next day. And sometimes not going out, driving out to UCSB, it was in Santa Barbara, and doing that last workout it would be more productive to go home and eat and go to bed, but yeah, I think part of my philosophy always was, because I was not a great athlete. I was a very average football player, a very average decathlete who got to train with a lot of great people. My best friend now still is Gord Stewart, who was a Canadian record holder in '72, and then Jerry Morrow, who was Canadian, broke his Canadian. I trained with those guys, but they were 1,000, 1,500 points better than me. But that's okay. I learned what I had to do. What I'm able to do today is because of the lessons I learned on myself. Because I did it. I'm not going to put a youngster through some of this craziness. I'm going to do it first. A little harder to do now at 76 than it was then, but I still try.
Wow. You're training smarter, basically what you do. You went from training not so great to training smarter. One of my
I
friends,
think so.
sorry, go ahead.
I think
Yeah.
so.
One of my friends, he's a UFC fighter. He was actually top of the game, and he was an older gentleman. But one of the things that he had said is, he's not training as long, but he's training
Yeah.
smarter.
Yeah.
And he multiple UFC belts. And he was an impressive individual to watch. A great
Yeah.
wrestler from Oklahoma State.
Okay. All right.
I'm not sure if you ever watched Randy Couture fight in the UFC.
I don't watch it. I'm peripherally. I have mixed feelings about some of that. I know that name though.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Randy was again. I think he started when he was 36, and he kind of ended around 46 in that sport. But he had to really be smart to be on top of that game and utilize that sort of thing. I don't watch the sport, tell you the truth, anymore. I don't like the way it's gone. I
Yeah.
don't like the bravado that's being promoted through it. I mean, it shut me down once Randy did leave, because he was kind of one of those athletes that didn't have the attitudes, didn't have the egos. Now they're all, it's rampant with those type of athletes in there. I don't consider them athletes. I consider them people that are selling tickets.
Well, it's interesting. Who I didn't realize was doing UFC,
Hmm.
and it's got a terrific. I don't know. I have it piled over here. Is it Sendeja? He was he was the gold medalist in Beijing in a real lightweight class, and I think he's fighting his last match or something like that.
Oh yeah. See, even now, I don't
Sendejo,
even follow
Sendejo.
it.
Yeah, I just saw that because for a few years, the biography was really interesting because he was homeless and he made the Olympic team and
Hmm.
he won every match through the gold medal match in the last, I don't know, I'm probably over exaggerating, like in the last 15 seconds, you know.
Hmm.
So when I see his name pop up, I pay attention to that,
Yeah,
you know. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so what I was going to go back to is, the kinetic chain. I mean, you had this epiphany through your own training, and then you've been trying to push it through the gain, your ideas through the gain and game program, and wherever you went through your professional career, stuff like that. What's happening now, and this is from my experience, where I have athletes, different clubs tend to hire dry land training organizations, and they don't
Mhm.
have the same philosophy as you. Um,
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
they're slowing. Are they slowing their athletes down as a result of that, or?
I don't want to, one of the worst things you can do is sound like you know it all, and I don't, and without knowing their programs and
Yeah.
that. But one of the axioms I use is a lot easier to make somebody slow in the pool or on the track or whatever
Mhm.
than it is to make them faster. And I think that some things, and again, I'm not going to, without seeing a program and actually seeing it in person, sometimes hands on, and understanding the philosophy behind it. But I see things, various things, and I have to question, like, why are you doing that?
Mhm.
It's and there's a young man, he's in his 40s now, Dan Noble. I don't know if you know Dan in Toronto. If you don't, you should have
Oh,
him on your
oh,
show.
you know what? I is he the soccer ball fella? The Polish guy that you were talking about?
No, 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 that's Bogdan
That's the name.
Prokowski.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry. So no, I haven't
we're
heard
gonna
of
have
that.
Bogdan on too. But no, Uh, Dan is done a lot with lacrosse. He's doing a lot with hockey. He has his own. I should know what school he is, and he's one of the founders. Great guy. Played football up there, and he gets it. And he could work with any sport
Mhm.
because it's principle based. See, that's the thing I want to know: is it principle based? And so when I look at something, when you say you send me a program and say, what do you think of this? Well, I want to know, what are the underlying principles behind this? What, say you send me a week of workouts, what they do the previous week? Where's it going to lead? See, I have an axiom that I've used too is one workout cannot make an athlete, but one workout can break an athlete. So I always say workouts are connected, you see. So what I do today must feed out of what I did yesterday and feed into tomorrow. Okay. So that there's a unity and a flow to what I do to get to the ultimate point that I need to get to, um, which is, in the competitive arena.
Mm, wow. So
And it sounds very fairy, but it isn't. It's just simple. It's simply knowing your athletes, knowing the sport, knowing your system. And I have a defined system, I admit, but I fit the system to the athlete, not the athlete to the system. Okay. Just like Formula One, they fit the car to fit the driver to the car. Okay,
Mhm.
or they wouldn't get anywhere. So it's the same thing. So everything has to you know, it's a little bit biblical, isn't it? There's time. What is that thing from whatever? I can't quote the Bible. Hell, I'm a phony when I do that. So anyway, but you
Yeah.
get it. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you're catering everything single thing to the individual, because there's so many differences in that in each individual that you come across.
People say, how do you do it with 40 people? Well, you get to know them.
Mhm.
It's tomorrow. There's a global workout. Okay, does the 14-year-old boy who's now just grown 3 inches, is he, even though Summer's almost 17, is he going to do the same thing as Summer? No. He's not same set and rep scheme. He's going to do the same exercises. Okay.
Mhm.
But he may not do as many sets. There's all kinds of things like that. And then there's some other kids in there that are going to be doing uh, the workouts are the way we set up our week is A workout, B workout, C workout. It doesn't necessarily mean A follows B. It's rotates around. So they
Mhm.
can be something else. But people just go nuts with it. How can you do that? How can you do that? Well, I taught his eighth grade history with kids that had an IQ of 80 like me and were geniuses. Okay. How'd you do that? Well, you grouped them. You got a different book for them. Come on, that's our job. We're coaches. We're teachers. you
Hmm.
know, and don't sell the athlete short. Don't let your shortcomings hold the athlete back. It doesn't have to be drastic, but I can tell you, Sean, that over 54 years of coaching and being generally athletes fall, say you got 40 kids or you have a football team, they generally fall in kind of like three groups. There's a big group in the middle, there's a group that needs a lot of remedial, and then you've got your thoroughbreds over here that really need something. You can break them really fast. So how do you juggle those? Well, that's why we get paid the big bucks. So anyway, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It is the individuals that you're working with. Again, like you said, you're tailoring to the individual group. Um, when you design a program for, let's say, Michigan, like you did before, how were you able to kind of implement that into there? Is a lot of talk with the coach?
Yeah, a lot of close work with Jim, really close work with Jim and his assistants. And then secondly, so you have that. Recognize you're working with females, so the strength training piece is probably 10 to 15, even 20% more important for them than the males. Thirdly, it in a collegiate environment, you have a clearer class. You have your sprinters, you have your middle distance, you have your distance, distance. Well, usually freestyle, and then you have some breaststroke and fly, which fall within those categories. So that is just you know uh, the sprinters are going to be, as the season progresses, are going to be less volume oriented, more high quality, high intensity. The distance kids keep the volume up. The middle distance or in between. So, and usually that's also your fly backstroke and breaststroker. So you're preparing for you're not imitating those strokes, so you're preparing for the strokes. So it was pretty simple. It fell into those classifications, and they had the workout, and it just, you knew where you were in the workout, and you just went down and over, boom, good, I'm ready to go. So yeah, with a club situation like I'm in now, it's a little tougher because we traditionally, our team does not separate out sprinters. It's more of more middle distance and distance, so it's a little more the same. But that's the way the head coach wants it, and so that's the way I do it. And
Hmm.
when I worked with University of Tennessee or with Singapore, we had we had male sprinters, female sprinters. So we had a female classification, a male classification, stroke, distance. And so it was like a matrix that would change relative to where you were in the phase of training. So
Hmm.
everything's driven in the pool and in track and field. It should be in American football, soccer should be driven by where you are in your season, where you are on the field, on the pool, on the track, on the court. That's the way I look at it, because that's what we're trying to do, is make them better in those disciplines. So yeah,
I was watching again some of your lectures, and you were talking about breaking up the season into training to prepare for competition.
yeah,
You're talking about, I think, I'm not even sure if it was one of your morning walks that you do on Instagram, but you had said something in regards to how you were breaking that down, and that the more competitions you had, sometimes for different sports, the better. Like having dual meets, you said that was.
that was just recently. Yeah, I was thinking about that again on my morning walk, but I'd already this morning. I'm of the opinion, and some people would label me old school, or they just label me a senile old man, which is okay too. But my good friend, that I got started coaching. We've known each other for, gosh, 60 years, longer than both of us have been coaching. And we talk about this a lot. He's back coaching. He's coached at some of the highest levels. He's back coaching high school. And when you're a high school athlete, let's say it's track and field, let's say, or swimming, and you say, okay, we're going to have 3 meets this year. I guarantee you'll lose half your team.
Mhm.
Because first of all, for a 14-year-old boy, he's going to learn more in 1 meet than he is in 5 practices. He's going to learn about competition. And then the practices, then they begin to understand, wait a minute, what I do in practice connects to what I do in a meet. So I think generally, now when you make generalizations at the developmental level, um, uh, a reasonable number of competitions is really developmental. Okay, as you start to go up the ladder to the top of the pyramid, and your competitive uh, preparation is more refined, your technique is more refined, then you probably don't need the amount of competition to get ready. You know, and certain sports are it's you don't have a choice. I just mentioned with cricket as an example. Elise right now is playing in the Ashes in England. Then she plays in the 100. Then she goes home and plays in Big Bash cricket. Then she'll play Test cricket in I forget where, Pakistan. Then she'll play Indian Premier League. Oh, and by the way, then she has 3 weeks without cricket to get ready, which she
Mhm.
did this year. And she worked two of those weeks. She worked out 4 times a day with me. You
Mhm.
know, that's what you have to do to be the best.
Mhm.
So that's dictated to you. You don't have a choice once you get to that level. Now, if you're a 14-year-old cricket player, you're a 14-year-old baseball player, you don't have to do that. You now and and in basketball and baseball in the US, I don't know how it is, and hockey in Canada, I think they play too many matches with young kids.
Mhm.
They don't allow for them to do the physical preparation commensurate with their growth and development, and so the kid that just got drafted number one by the Blackhawks. I mean, everybody knew he's going to be the number one draft pick when he was 12 years old. But what about those other kids that were there with him that you never hear anything about? That's what I always think about. That they probably wouldn't have been number one picks, but they could have probably still been playing the game. Maybe they are. So. Uh,
Mhm.
so I'm going crazy here. You got me.
No, no, keep it up. The more the better. The overtraining portion, that's what I mean, I think that's what you're getting at. There's too much training. And I've seen it in hockey up here. And of course, that's why well, I'll tell you, because my dad never taught me to skate because we were on the wrestling mat. But I can imagine part of it was because you always see a hockey family up here. They're in the rinks at 7 in the morning. They are there every single day, beating each other up, and it's hard nosed hockey in there sometimes. Like it's just
Mhm, mhm.
it can be exhausting, I guess.
Well, and look, the success perpetuates this. So
Mhm.
Canada just won the world championship, right, in
Mhm.
hockey. So everybody's going to look, yeah, that's what we did, and I can't prove my approach.
Mhm.
Not in hockey, I had the opportunity to work with my one of my best friends and colleague Jim Radcliffe, working with American women's hockey team in 2018 that beat Canada. And I know we trained very differently than everybody else through the influence of a tremendous man named Jack Blatherwick, who influenced Herb Brooks. Jack is in his 80s now, but it wasn't the same as what everybody was doing. There was no distance running. There was no, and it was about speed and that. Now at the developmental level, Jack feels the same way. That there should be times when you're working on speed, you're working on power development, you're working on structural strength. So that you go back on the ice and you're going to be better on the ice too. So, but it's hard because in traditional sports like hockey's a traditional sport in a country that's had dominated the world and
Mhm.
dominated the NHL. Um, you'll hear guys say, "Why?" Even guys in their 20s, "Why should we change?
Mhm.
Is there a better way?" My attitude is, look, I went all through parochial schools. I drove the nuns nuts because I always asked them why, and I'd always say why. Why? Even in college, I knew that the coaching that I was getting in football was terrible, except
Mhm.
for one coach. Okay, if you read the Bulldog years,
Yes.
Coach Murray, and but why was it done that way? Because we always did it that way. And
Mhm.
you lived in Fresno, so is it really productive to keep your helmet on, wear a long sleeve wool jersey, have a Dixie cup full of water, and
Mhm.
practice 3 times a day in 100-degree heat? And
Mhm.
guess why? We always played terrible in our first two games because you had residual fatigue from the 2 or 3 a day practices. But
Yep.
that's the way everybody did it. Alabama did it. Bear Bryant did it that way, you know. So
Yep.
we got to do it, except he didn't have Bear Bryant type of athletes. He had Vern Gambettas, you know.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So enough said.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did read your the your background with Fresno State. I forget which book it was where you talked about it, and about your football career and how
Bulldog years. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'm going to turn it. We're going to turn that into I'm going to try to sell it to Hollywood as a movie. That's just a joke, like, yeah, it's people, and then that was the norm. I could have changed. I had friends who played at other schools. That was the norm. They just kicked the shit out of you. That was the whole goal. And then at the end of practice, you conditioned, and if you puked, it was really good conditioning.
hmm I can tell you I've experienced that even currently with some of the kids that I know that are in different programs where that's still going on.
Oh
Right?
yeah,
An abusive coach. It's swim out there. There's little given to
oh
rest or
yeah,
nutrition. It's and we would take those children away from that coach just so that they're not.
yeah. And, how often do you hear that's the way we did it? So
Mhm.
that's the way I, and I look. I had a great high school basketball coach, Mr. Keel, and I learned so much from him. He was also a tremendous history teacher. Scared the hell out of me as a ninth grader, and a little bald-headed guy about 5'5".
Yeah.
And I mean, I'd never seen so much red ink in my life as the first little paper I turned into him, and but we became friends. I helped him coach when I was in college and auto coach,
Yeah.
and I think back to what we did, and he didn't coach basketball; he taught basketball.
hmm
He taught us how to be better players,
hmm
and so and I think the most important thing, he taught us how to be better people. He certainly took the punk out of me. I know that, and stopped talking back to refs and
hmm
making faces and things like that. Those are important, important lessons. Yeah, yeah.
And I heard your story with him where you had to go to the school. What was it? The store to buy a pencil.
Oh yeah, and I well, you have to go to mass, Catholic school, and I'm Catholic, still am, and
Yeah.
so the day of the games, you have to go to mass. Well, I didn't drive, so my friend had to get, and I'd have to get up an hour earlier, and I didn't want to do that, so I just didn't go to mass, and I was a starter. And he calls out the starting lineup, and I'm not in it, and
hmm
I'm pissed, but I know what I did, and I know he's so. Um, Next day, I had to. He ran a student store. I had to buy a pencil. I go up, put a dime on the counter there, and he says, "Vernon," he said, "Are you interested in playing?" And I said, "Yes, Mr. Keel." I kind of go like, "Yes." He says, "Well, maybe you want to go to mass." That's
hmm
all he said. Nothing else. Never raised his voice. Never called me out in front of anybody else. And I mean, right? That I mean, I'm 76 years old. I can remember that just like that day. You
hmm
know, I was watching a thing the other night, part of with Bill Walton and John Wooden, and John Wooden did the same thing.
hmm
He'd go around and he said, "Oh, your hair doesn't match," and Wooden says, Walton says, "I don't have time to get a haircut," and he says, "You got 20 minutes until practice. Get a haircut." And he made it to practice and he got a haircut.
uh-huh.
That's all he had to say. He says, remember, I think he called him, no, he called Kareem Lou, no,
hmm
Lewis. But Walton, he just called Bill. And he said, remember, if you miss practice, you don't play in the game.
hmm
So it was an easy message. Now I don't know if you could do that today. Parents would be all over you and stuff, but anyway, those are life lessons, and that to me is the most important part of coaching. Look, when you have an athlete tell you this, I won't say who, 3 weeks ago, and say, "Look, you revived my career, you saved my career."
hmm
Is that's better than any world record, any gold medal, and this athlete is going to go on, and it's not summer, so I didn't have to save her career.
Automatically, I think Canadian. So
Yeah, right. No, but and then the beauty of now of Facebook and that is, I was in Holland I'd lost track of my best runner from Santa Barbara High School from the
hmm
70s, and we connected on Facebook, and I ended up going over there to do a talk, and she came with her letter sweater, and with her husband, and you know what's so cool about it, Sean? We'd hardly talked at all. We talked about one. We used to train in front of the Santa Barbara Mission. People Google Santa Barbara Mission. It's iconic. It's beautiful. But there's this beautiful 500-meter field in a rose garden. That's the only thing. And everything else was talking about my Volkswagen van, going out to eat with my wife, all those kinds of things, So it's what we're able to do is just as coaches is so special. It's so special. That's all I can say. And I'm probably not gonna keep coaching day to day like I have the last 9 months after World Championships this year for a lot of different reasons. But I will keep designing programs and that. It's just some of my goals in life are being modified. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, a couple of things I wanted to hit on before I let you go.
okay.
Preparation for competition. You talked in one of I don't remember where it is. Like I said, I immersed myself in your world
Gosh,
prior
I'm
to
impressed.
this
Yeah.
this interview.
You
But you
probably have a headache, but anyway, go ahead.
the neurological component when it came to prepping for the competition, whether it's swimming or whatever, wrestling. One of the things but my dad used to do, and this was what his junior college coach had told me after he passed away. He used to go underneath the bleachers and just mentally kind of zone in. Way before Michael Jordan got into the zone, he had said that he was in the zone. That's how he would get to the zone. But other things than just the mental portion, but the physical portion. I see these athletes now, with the bands at the side of the pool, and how important
Yeah.
is that?
Well, yeah, that I mean, first of all, it's a routine.
Mhm.
I think every champion I've been around, regardless of the sport, has a routine bordering on ritual. All
Mhm.
right, and I encourage that as long as it's not some weird stuff. Like I have to have 2 liters of something that you can't get when you go to Japan or
Yeah.
something. But because that gives them an anchor, a secure point that
Mhm.
they can help them focus. Okay, so I think that's really important. So rehearsal. That's
Mhm.
and every day I don't think of warm up as warm up. I think of it as rehearsal, and then the neuromuscular part that my daughter I coached my daughter in high school in the sprints, and she came up with a term that I love. It's called sprinty. Sprinty means I feel like I'm ready to go. I'm my legs are light. I'm poppy, and now I use that with everybody. I want you. So, Summer's case, we're four. Wait, we're 4 weeks out from the end of World Championship, a little under 3 weeks out. So starting now, tomorrow we have one landmark workout. It's a simple workout. I want her that's usually pretty exhausting in dry land. I want her to finish that like feeling like, yeah, I feel a little bit perky. I'm not. We're going to do less sets, in that, and then everything done going forward should be what I have to feel sprinty. So I might have a workout written today, but I might also reserve this. I always say they're written in pencil because I can erase it. So I want to go day to day, day by day, to have that athlete feeling better and better and better. And I think the old school approach was, I think back to college and, like, shoot, our hardest workout sometimes was Thursday, and we had residual fatigue for the game. Where my good friend Jimmy Radcliffe, he and Chip Kelly changed American football, where Thursday was basically the shortest practice. Friday, the day before the game, was a speed practice. Everything and we did this with the American hockey team. They would do a what we call a priming workout or priming lift, where they would do 3 explosive lifts, some med ball throws, and some jumps the morning of the match, or they played at night in Korea. They did it in the afternoon. Elise Perry, the cricket player right now, so the morning she plays Saturday, so she'll do a priming workout. Well, she'll do it Friday night because the meet starts at 11. So that neurological, it's that neurological element that you're priming you're really priming and getting the nervous system ready to recruit, to fire, and that. And it's individual. What you have to work out is, as you get to know the athlete, some of them, uh, young athletes think it's going to make them tired. Well, that's why you introduce it in bite-sized chunks, too. So does that answer the question, or?
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask about tapering. I think you kind of hit on it there,
Yeah,
because that. I mean, again, I've witnessed to programs where the tapering doesn't occur. They just train and make their athletes so sore before the
yeah,
event, and it's,
yeah.
um, we saw poor performance like from the get go.
Now,
Uh,
I don't like to do that, but I'm my head coach.
mhm,
Our kids competed last week, and all of them were very, very tired. Some of them swam well, some of them swam average, and
mhm,
I there's not, that's out of my control. I know that Summer broke the world record on Monday in
mhm,
Toronto, and she did her last strength training workout on Friday.
mhm,
And probably going into the world championship, it will be a similar routine, probably 3 days. I can't remember which event is the first event. No, I don't mean to, I don't know yet. I've got a sheet here where we're working that all out right now. But yeah, and taper is an interesting thing. That what I talked about was taper. That's you want to start feeling better and better and better.
mhm.
Swimmers traditionally have been almost borderline psycho about taper, and I think sometimes uh, just over the top. It's just you're used to doing a certain amount. Your body can react negatively to doing nothing too.
Mm.
So you have to find that threshold that excites the nervous system, makes you feel sprinty, not dead. So yeah,
Yeah, when you're talking about the cricket player that does the lifts the same day of the competition.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean that is going against what most.
Well, I don't have it right. I don't have it on my fingertips. She does. Uh, it's 3 exercises. This is one of it we call connections.
Mhm.
So she used this the other day before the final game or she does 3 exercises, 2 med ball throws, and jump rope.
Yeah.
I mean, it's with 9 kilo dumbbells or something like that. So I
Okay.
mean, it's a lift, and
Yeah.
then the women on the Olympic team, they're bigger women. You've got, so they did some stuff with a bar, but 40% of a 1 RM for 3 reps,
Mhm.
just really fast. So yeah, yeah, yeah.
Awesome. I want to thank you, Vern, for your time. I know it's very valuable. I've seen your resume. I've seen where you've worked. In fact, I'll tell you the truth. When I was looking at your resume, I went, "Why is this guy saying yes to me?" But I mean, very impressive. I mean, going from the Chicago White Sox, talking about the 49ers, who is my favorite team. So I was impressed with that right from the go.
Yeah.
Working in just about every sport. You work with the Canadian national basketball team,
Basketball team, great
men's,
experience, great
women.
experience. Yeah, men
Uh,
and women. Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
it looks like every sport almost, and except for wrestling. But I want to thank you again for just man, sharing your time, sharing your knowledge with us. I'm hoping that this podcast will actually reach somebody and convince them to change their methodology,
Good.
because just reading and researching you before this podcast, being a coach myself, I don't know if you knew this about me, but I was a three-time world team coach for grappling, university wrestling coach as well, and then now I'm actually with kids. I'm teaching kids again because that's where I
Yeah.
find that so much more rewarding than top level athletes for me at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, there's some of these little 14-year-olds are just a joy to watch. And
Mhm,
well, I thank you for having me on, and it's really neat because I didn't know who you were, and
mhm.
so we've got the Bulldog connection, but you've done your homework, which is really impressive. My gosh, you probably know more about my ideas than I do, and I really encourage you to reach out to Dan Noble. I think you'd really enjoy him. Have a
Yeah.
cup of coffee with him too, and that he's just a great person. The same thing with Bogdan. Bogdan's just a top notch guy. He's and that too. So
Well, I
Big
was listening to your, I think he was on your Gaines podcast,
yeah,
and he was
yeah,
talking about that, how he was the only one in Poland. I guess was it pre-war or post-war Poland, and he was the only one with a soccer ball.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
in town. I mean, see, we don't it's hard for us to relate to those things, I mean, because his family was a little more well-to-do, so they had a real soccer ball. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, and it's, that's that's there's something to be said for that, I don't think we need to create, I know we've got to end here, but an impoverished environment. But, we give our kids everything. And I'll summarize by Stefan Vidmar, who's Swiss, who was the head coach in Singapore when I helped with their swimming, made a real good statement. He said, what we're doing today is we're spending way too much time preparing the road for the child and making it smooth and straight and removing all obstacles and removing all uh, detours, instead of spending our time preparing the child for what the road is going to bring. And I'll leave that as my last statement. And we, as a society, and as us as adults, I think we have to really think about that now. So,
Hmm.
thanks again. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. That's awesome. Thank you.